Hi everyone, it's Wednesday, June 17th. Still not sure when my next haircut's going to be. Um, anyway, working with Camtasia today, going to try to do some of these videos on this different type of software and see how it works out for you all. So in addition to my lovely face, you should be seeing on your screen my Sibelius mock-up there, and today we're going to talk about four-way spread voicings, but also I have another camera pointed at my piano over here, so hopefully maybe some of that visualization might help you guys as well. So let's just talk about what a spread voicing is very quickly. So spread voicings, I think probably the simplest way to think about spread voicings, these are voicings that are really, really good for pads, and they are mostly defined by having the root in the lowest voice. So the lowest voice is actually acting as sort of a bass voice for the voicing. So these are complete voicings with a rooted fourth voice. So that means actually your fourth voice has to be an instrument that plays pretty low. Actually, yeah, there is a rule about that, which we'll get to in a few minutes here. But we're going to talk about two different types of spread voicing. Four-way spread, which we're going to talk about today, and then in another video coming up, we'll talk about a five-way spread. But for instance, a four-way spread, if you have four trombones, that's a really, really good place to use a four-way spread if you want to create some sort of pad. You can also use a four-way spread in the saxophone section, very effective. So maybe that's if one of the voices is soloing or something like that, or just that's a choice you want to make. You could combine instruments to make a spread voicing. Some of our alternate woodwinds, like bass clarinet and clarinets, would be a good combination for a spread voicing. But let's take a look at how we would put these together. So these are a lot more specific than our four-way close or drop two type voicings, in that if you look here on the screen, for each of the voices in a four-way spread, we have some very specific things that they can be. So actually, I'm going to go from the bottom to the top instead. So our fourth voice is always going to be the root. And I guess the other rule there, when we talk about the root in the fourth voice, it's going to be either this D here, no matter what your chord is, right, or lower. So in other words, we don't want any spread voicings that have our root anywhere in this area. The root really needs to be pretty low to give us that really nice lush sound of a spread voicing. The next note up can be a third, a fifth, or a seventh. And for the most part, I gotta be honest with you, when I write spread voicings, I'm always, unless there's some sort of melody that I created where I'm gonna have a third or a fifth or a seventh in, excuse me, a third or a seventh in my lead. I'm always thinking of the second and third voices here as the third and seventh. Notice here there's the option of the fifth in the third voice. And remember, if we go back to our lower interval limits, a natural fifth interval can go pretty low down. So that's one of the reasons why that fifth is there. But once again, the second and third voices here, I generally like to have either the third or the seventh. The lead note, notice here, any available tension, and I put best, right? And if you notice in my example here that I wrote, all of the lead notes that I wrote are all available tensions on those particular chords. You do not ever want to put a root as your lead note. And these spread voicings are generally going to be voicings that you're composing in your arrangements, to create some sort of pad. Or actually, they can be a supporting voicing when we get to full tutti later, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But obviously, if you put a root in your lead and your fourth note also has to be a root, that means we've gone down to a three-note voicing, and we're going to lose some of the information in there that we really, really want to hear. So please do not write a root in the lead voice. Once again, available tensions are the best. We can create four-way spreads with a fifth, a third, or a seventh. As a matter of fact, let's see, did I put any fifths? No, I didn't put any fifths. But fifths are actually a very, very good lead note in a four-way spread. Thirds and sevenths are a little harder to deal with, but you can do it. For now, let's go ahead and go through, oh, by the way, also some other rules here. So your lead note, notice these lead notes are fairly low in tessitura. Now, actually, when I'm done with this, we're going to explode this out into the trombone section. So, like for instance, this F sharp and this A flat and this G are, they're medium high on trombone. And they would be, in a saxophone section for like an alto sax, they'd be pretty low actually. Well, no, not exactly. There'd be a written F here, so it's not really that low. We do not want to write our lead notes in four-way spread higher than this particular D here, right, than the fourth line D in treble staff. It tends to get too spread out. If you do that, it also kind of starts to get a little bit intense for the function of a spread voicing. So anyway, the intervals here can be fairly spread out, hence the word spread. As a matter of fact, between the lowest two voices, we can have intervals as large as a tenth. Actually, on a sus chord, you could have an interval of an 11th, if you have a 4 subbing for a 3. In our example here, you're going to see we're going to write quite a few tenths. So let's go ahead and dive into it. So here's a good old kind of 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 progression in B flat. I didn't put a key signature, so we're going to have some accidentals here, but that's okay. So D minor 7th, look at what our lead note is. It is one of the available tensions. In this case, it's an E, which is the 9th of this chord. So the next note down can be a third or a 7th. If I were to write a third here, that would be pretty far away. So what if we go for a 7th? I think a 7th would be a nice note there for our next note. Then let's keep our idea of 2 up, 2 down. Next note down could be a third, fifth, or a 7th, but we always need to have, I guess that's another rule I don't have up here, to make it a complete voicing and to give us all of the information that we need in a voicing, we always need that third and 7th in there. So even though the 5th is technically a available note here, we need to have that third in there to give us the actual quality of this minor 7th chord. So always must have a third and 7th in the voicing. Okay, and then we're left with our root. So I did say that we could write a root here, and that would be fine. That would be a fine spread voicing. But, with a bass trombone, if I'm going to explode this out to a bass trombone, I'm going to use I'm going to use that cannon and give us, let's go down here and actually write that low D. Now that's a great note on bass trombone. It sounds really rich and beautiful, and it's going to make that voicing sound really full. So if you're looking at the keyboard, right? I mean, this is like, I'm very fortunate to have the size hands I have. I can actually play a 10th interval in my left hand, especially in this case here. But there's that 10th interval, right? Pretty spread out. And then in the right hand here, we have that E and that C, right? So there's a beautiful spread voicing. These may look kind of familiar for those of you who've done jazz piano class with Ken. I have a feeling he's had you do some of these. This kind of looks like, in our lowest 3 voices here, we kind of have a shell voicing, right? We have a root, a third, and a 7th, and then one more note on top. Okay. So let's move on here to our next voicing, which is a G7 with a flat 13. Once again, we have a tension in the lead. So our next note down could be a third or a 7th. And if this is going to be a line, I think it'd be really nice if we do some good voice leading here, right? So maybe that voice from C is going to voice lead best down to the B. And I mean, that would make the most sense here anyway. If we try to write the 7th here and then the third down here, that would be too low. So that just sort of, it almost kind of writes itself, doesn't it? Right? And then we have to have a seventh, since we have the third up here, must have the seventh. And then here's our root. And you'll notice in this case, now we've gone from a 10th to a 7th. And this is a very common thing to happen, especially in functional chord progression, as far as spread voicings go. So there's a beautiful G7 with a flat 13 in it. Next one here, we have a C7 with a sharp 11. So once again, I'm going to voice lead. So I have a sharp 11 in the lead. Next one down is going to be a B flat. Whoops, I lost my... I always do that. Put my sharp 11 back in there. Okay. And then, so we have our 7th here. That means we need a 3rd. And look how nicely it's voice leading, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and put in this low C. This is getting towards the bottom of that bass trombone. I mean, most bass trombonists can actually go quite a bit lower than that. I wouldn't, with the bass trombone, go any lower, though, than the pedal B flat, which is one whole step down from that particular C. Matter of fact, we'll see, on the last voicing, I'm not going to want to do that, actually, now that I look at it. But here's a real nice voicing. So once again, we have a tension in the lead. We have the 3rd and the 7th in there, representing the quality of that chord. And we have a C, which is the root down at the bottom. Okay, next one. Here I'm actually going to change the voice leading. We have a sharp 9 in the lead. Now I could go ahead and, I could go ahead and put in that A below it. But then I'd have kind of a pretty far interval here between the lead note and the next one down, which is not exactly desirable. So I'm going to go ahead and change the voice leading, and I'm going to move this one up to the 7th. Next one down, I'm going to go ahead and put the 3rd, which we tried to do but didn't like, and then bring the root up to here. And notice we have another beautiful 10th interval, right, from the F to the A. Next one here, so this is a B flat 6. Once again, what's the category of this chord? This is a 1 chord, right? So it's kind of anything goes. So I'm going to go, this is a 6. Next one down, well, the next, probably good note to put in here would be the 3rd. Darn it. Keep doing it. Okay. But, we could put in a 5th then. I mean, technically, we're covered there. We have a note that is a 7th category. Whoops. We have a note that's a 7th category. That's 6th. We have a 3rd. So technically, we're kind of done. We could put in a 5th. But guess what? I'm just going to go ahead and put in a major 7th there. And look, that gives us this beautiful quartal structure on the top. Sounds like this. Right? Which is real nice. So let me play the whole progression from the top. Make sure we have enough volume here. Here we go. And that sounds really nice, right? You can imagine. As a matter of fact, let's not just imagine. Let's go ahead and explode this out into the 4 trombones so we can hear what that sounds like in context. And I've been playing around with the explode function, and I've kind of got it figured out. I wish you could actually do it from 2 staves, but you can only do it from 1 staff. So if you guys want to, those of you who have Sibelius, if you want to play around with this, here's how you do it. So in the Note Input tab, you go to the plugins and you have this Explode plugin here. Once again, it has a couple of limitations. So I'm going to explode this. It's asking me how many stabs do I want to explode it to, since there's 2 voices there. Yeah, 2 stabs is going to do it. There's some settings here, and I was hoping that when I unchecked this box, I would lose the chord symbols, but unfortunately I don't. So I think you just kind of leave all this stuff unchecked here. I think this stuff is better for, choir music if you're trying to explode this into like 4, like SATB anyway, let's see what happens here. So then you hit OK, and then what it asks you is, where do you want this stuff put? Do you want to create new destination stabs for it? So that's one way we could actually start. You could actually create some new stabs, but I already have my trombone stabs here. So I'm going to want to explode these two into the trombone 1 and the trombone 2 stabs. So it's pretty cool. Watch what happens. Boom, puts them in there. The only problem is you'll notice that the chord symbols are there. So while I have that selected like this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go to my filter, hit chord symbols, and then just delete those. Right, so that was easy. So now look, I have my first 2 trombone parts. I'm going to do that with my my third and fourth trombone. To do the same thing, I'm going to explode this into trombone 3 and trombone 4. Actually, yeah, bass trombone, right? Boom, there we go. Now we got it. So if we want to hear this, let's hear this without the piano part. See how that sounds. Cool. And of course, you know, your spread voicings do not have to be just whole notes. You can put whatever rhythms you like in there. Gary in his book has some really, really good examples with audio. So please listen to those. Once again, I'll create a discussion about four-way spread voicing. So if you want to ask any questions, you can ask them there, and I will answer them very promptly. So anyway, hopefully this is helpful for four-way spread voicings. I'll also put this Sibelius file up there for you. All right, see you guys in a little bit.